Hiya, good morning. My name is Owen. Welcome to the cupboard. So, in this video, I'm going to be going over the best and the worst books that I've read in the first half of this year. Honestly, I've not read that many bad books. I think I've done quite well. I think this year I've really started to understand what I like to read. So, when it comes to picking a new book, I've got more used to identifying things that I'm more likely to enjoy. So, I will be starting with the worst books I've read this year, but in actuality, there really weren't that many that I disliked. So, saying that, I'm going to be starting with the first book on this list, and that is The Palm House by Gwendolyn Riley. So I don't have this book anymore. I got it in a wee free library and I've since put it back. So a lot of what I'm going to say is not particularly fresh in my mind, but these are the general things that I was left with after having read it. Starting with the actual structure of this book, I think it's worth saying that I'm not a particularly big fan of short story collections. Even though this book isn't a short story collection, it's sort of like a series of vignettes that are only tangentially connected, and I didn't particularly enjoy that style. I felt during the whole thing that I was trying to grasp at the meaning of telling these stories at this time, because we're following one character. Because we're following one character and it's just these moments in her life. I was trying to work out the through line through them all, as you would in a normal novel, and I think I was struggling a wee bit with that. That being said, the actual writing of the book was quite nice. I actually enjoyed the way it was written and the atmosphere that was created in some of these vignettes. But I think I should explain a wee bit of the plot before I go any further. So, our main character is a journalist and she works at a newspaper. So, when we first see her, we're introduced to her and her best friend, her childhood friend, that both work at this imprint, I think it's a newspaper. From what I remember and what starts off the plot is that this friend is being forced into retirement or being asked to leave, but in a nice way. And he's really struggling with this change in his life. So a lot of this is they're like discussing things while at the pub, and because of the things that are happening in the present, it's forcing her to reflect on what has happened in her childhood. The thing that stands out in my mind is one of these little vignettes is a little story that does quite a few things and quite a few things quite well, I thought. In the story, she's a young teenager, I think between 13 and 15, something like that, maybe 16. And she's discovered this new artist that she really likes, a singer. And she's also made this friend with an older girl who she really looks up to. And she's at the age where she's really desperate to feel grown up and to seem and be treated like an adult, even though she isn't one. So, as her and this new friend develop a closer and closer relationship, they're also going to see this singer a lot. They're taking the train out and going to see him and hanging about and trying to get his attention. And our main character forms this sort of obsession about this guy who she sees as like this big infamous person who's really really important. She puts a lot of importance on this relationship or perceived relationship that she could have with him. So in order to get his attention, she starts making these little videos, or I can't remember now if there were videos or like audio recordings of her just like talking to him. I can't exactly remember the specifics, but she was sending these things directly to this artist, the singer, and he was actually receiving them. So after getting this guy's attention, she gets a hold of him outside of one of his shows after it, and he invites her and her friend back to his house. And that starts this very uncomfortable relationship with this older man who's got all the power. She is essentially still a child, and she doesn't quite understand the gravity of the situation and how easy it would be for him to take advantage of her. And eventually, he does. While she's telling the story, we're also getting a view of what her relationship with her mother is like, and this sort of, I wouldn't quite say apathy, but her mother is very sort of disengaged and sort of just does lets her do whatever she likes. We get a little bit of a glance of her grandmother as well, and it's the same, and so you're slowly understanding that this is a generational problem. So like I say, there were some standout bits to this book, and that isn't the whole story. Basically, the whole novel is not that. The whole novel is primarily about her relationship to her friend, and if she can be a good friend to this man now that he is in need of her help. I think it says a lot that I can't really remember the large majority of the plot and where it went. There was somebody else's. It was really like disjointed, so I'm finding it difficult to find the pieces in my head because of that. But like I said, there were some strong points to it, and I did feel that the author was trying. trying to make these points specifically about, you know, familial trauma and the way that it gets passed down through your children if you're not, if you yourself in your life are not willing or able to look at yourself clearly and combat it before you pass it on. And of course, she's also making a point about girlhood and how easy it is for vulnerable children, vulnerable girls, to be taken advantage of by people in power, by people that they admire. So I think that part of it was well done to an extent. I struggled to find the purpose of it in the larger plot. However, it was a good insight into the character that we were following. I didn't feel like we were just going on it for the sake of the journey, you know what I mean? It did impact the character and her choices, but it didn't feel particularly important to the plot as a whole. So, like I say, it wasn't a particularly bad book, it just was forgettable generally. I think I gave it something average, like 2.5 stars. But it was good on a writing level, and I think there was still some merit in that. So that was The Palm House by Gwendolyn Riley. So the next two books on my worst list are books I've talked about before, so I'll link them in the top if you're interested. I won't go into as much detail in this section because I have talked about them before. The next one is A Land So Wide by N.A. Craig. It's a fantasy, it's an adult book, but that is where the problem was for me personally. This is the first adult book that author had written, and it just read like a YA book. And not that that's a bad thing. I read a lot of YA, I enjoy YA. The problem is in the marketing, and that it felt for me that the author just wanted to have intimacy on the page and didn't want to do the extra work to make the characters feel older. I did feel that there were other issues within that book, but I think that was the standout one in my memory, is just the characters felt so young, and the whole plot revolved around how much she really wanted to marry this man, and she was really invested in her relationship with this man, and I just didn't buy it at all because she felt so juvenile. Not that young love isn't important to the people that are in it, and not that you can't feel like that while you're young. It's that because the plot relied so heavily on this relationship, I needed to buy it. I needed to believe that she was willing to give up everything for this man to go out and you know, risk her life and on the rest of it to just to get him back, or to save her relationship with him, and I just didn't buy it at all. Like I've said before, it wasn't horrendous. I was maybe a wee bit bored, but it was a perfectly fine book, just one that had a few flaws that I couldn't really look past. That was A Land So Wide by N.A. Craig. The next one I've also talked about before, it's Don't Let the Forest In by C.J. Drews. I always struggle saying that. C.G. Drews. So I've literally just talked about this, so I won't touch on it very long. It wasn't, again, it wasn't an egregious, like, horrible book. There was just a few bits that felt a bit sticky to me because I wasn't particularly immersed in the world. It was on the younger side of YA. It would just happen to be based in the time period, in the age that I didn't particularly want to get back into. And the last main twist wasn't particularly satisfying either. But apart from that, I mean, again, it's not hurting anyone. It's just a sort of average book. So that was Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. And that is the end of my worst list. So I'm going to move on to the best books that I've read this year so far. Not all of the books on this list are 5 stars, but they're the ones that I've enjoyed the most, the ones I've had the most fun reading. They won't quite make it to the best books of the year. When I do that at the end of the year, I'm pretty particular when it comes to that list. But some of these are really just honourable mentions, books that I really enjoyed and want to talk about. So yes, I started off my January with one of the best books, maybe one of the best books I read this year, and that is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I'd never read anything by Andy Weir before, and I just heard people talking about this. Was before that the film was announced, and I'd been on the waiting list for ages to get it out the library, and I'd finally got it, and I read it, and it was just brilliant. I always think I don't like sci-fi, and then every time I pick up a sci-fi book, I have a really good time. I can't imagine that anybody watching this hasn't heard of Project Hail Mary by now, but I'm going to try and be as spoiler-free as possible because, like, every book on this list, I think people should try and read if they want to read them. So, Project Hail Mary essentially is is about Earth's attempt at saving the sun because the sun is dimming and they don't know why. So the whole adventure is discovering what is happening with the sun, what is causing it to dim, and what can they do about it. Basically, they end up in space. And that's all I'm going to say because it is really brilliant and you should definitely go and read it if it sounds interesting. So that is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. The next one I have here, this is The Will of the Many by James Islington. This book scared me. I'd had it on my list, on my shelf, for a while, and when it comes to big books with as small writing as this has, I just didn't want to pick it up. But as soon as I picked it up, I read it in like a few days. It was brilliant. It was so like fast paced. I just didn't want to put it down. Essentially, we're following this. He's an orphan in a society that has a very specific power system. It's essentially a magic system. It's basically like a pyramid scheme, but people have power. The people above them in society get a section of their power. It's a hierarchy where the power is shared, but it's not shared equally. So the people at the top are receiving power from every single person below them, and prisoners are deemed the lowest of this hierarchy. So the magic system and the power system, they're really unique to this book, and I found them very interesting. And I feel like I'm not doing a very good job. This book is so good, and there's so much to it. I think that's what it is, and it spans quite a long time. Essentially, this makes his way into the most prestigious school he can. But in order to get into the school, he lies his way in, and he has ulterior motives. And one of those motives is he's there to solve a murder. And basically, he's harboring this massive secret, one that will get him killed if they find out. So he's put himself in harm's way to try and solve this murder. And if anybody finds out who he truly is, what his background is, where he's come from, then they'll kill him. I feel like I'm not doing it justice. I'm not explaining this particularly well, but if it sounds interesting, definitely pick it up. I had a great time. I'm yet to pick up the second one. I will get round to it. It's just on my list. Yeah. Okay, that was The Will of the Many by James Islington. The next one on the list. The next one on the list is this. It's Reaper Man by Terry Pratchett. Now, I've talked about Terry Pratchett before. I feel like I say that in every video now. This one specifically follows death, like personified. It asks the question, what happens if death takes a day off? Half of it is following death, half of it is following a wizard who failed to die. It was his time, he knew it was coming, as all wizards do, and then he just doesn't go. And we see the repercussions of this. He's treated like a zombie in the society. He's viewed as something abnormal or inhuman, and they don't know what to do with him. It's a really interesting take on sort of oppression, because the longer that death takes off, the more people die but don't die. So these groups of like almost zombies form. They create like help groups, and they like join forces, and they're trying to get their rights and that kind of thing. It's a really, I think I've already said this, but they're really unique little books, and I really had a great time with this one in particular. And I've not even mentioned Death. Death is a brilliant character. I just really enjoy what Terry Pratchett does with Death as a character. Yeah, like I say, not a 5 star, but it's close. Yeah, that is Reaper Man by Terry Pratchett. Okay, I've got 6 more on the list, but I have already talked about each of them, so I'm gonna speed run them. The next one is this absolute brick. It's Ordinary Monsters by J.M. Myro. This book is a bit of a mess, but it is great fun. It's so propulsive. You just don't want to put it down. I sort of like the other one, had this on my shelf for a good couple of months before I finally had the courage to pick it up. But once I did, I just sped through it. It was brilliant. It's mostly set in Scotland, which I also enjoyed, and it wasn't particularly stereotypical, which cannot be said for some books. Again, like The Will of the Many, I haven't picked up the second book. I will do it eventually. I've got sidetracked by Patrick Ness. But yes, if you like monsters, if you like magic, if you like stories set in the past that feel grounded, that feel, well, almost true to life, but with magic on top, essentially, definitely give it a try, pick it up, see what you think. The library will probably have it, so if you're not sure, get out of the library. It's always good to support your local libraries. So, yes, that is Ordinary Monsters by J.M. Myro. Gone Girl. Oh, I don't have that here. The next one is Gone Girl. I literally just talked about this. I don't have it anymore because I put it back in the book box from where I got it. Gone Girl is one of these books that, for me, feels like a one-time read. Like I wouldn't really want to pick up again because the most enjoyment I get out of it is the suspense of not knowing what's going to happen. It's essentially like a murder mystery or a thriller. We're following a relationship between a man and a woman, and basically the man is suspected of murdering her. What's really well done in that book is how well the author controls what you think. The way that it is written is such a lesson in rhetoric. Up until the halfway point, I believed exactly what the author wanted me to believe on looking back on it. And it's so interesting to see how your opinions are formed by the information that you're given and how sure you can feel in that moment before you're given, you know, more information, more accurate information. So it sort of makes you look back at yourself and consider, what are the things that I believe and why do I believe them? Why am I so sure about these things? Do I have all the information? And I think that in a book is just brilliant. A brilliant example of how good writing can be. So yeah, give it a go, see what you think. That is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. The next two are romances, which is a big surprise for me because I don't read any romances at all, and I don't think I've read any more since then. They are We Could Be So Good by Cat Sebastian and Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. From what I remember at the time, Atmosphere was just released or newly released, and a lot of people were talking about it, and I was still riding the Project Hail Mary high in this because this is about space, so I wanted to feel that again. um, so I was quite surprised. It's a completely different book. This is a book about space, but it's not really a book about space. It's a book about, it says a love story in front. It's a love story. Primarily it's a romance book. So the space elements do sort of take a back seat. However, I enjoyed it. And I do think the space elements really did add to it. We're following two astronauts, but they're not quite astronauts yet. They've just joined the space program. They're hopeful to follow this program to its end and to get up into space, basically. It's a lot to do with the interpersonal connections and friendships within this class, and also there's this underlying understanding that the relationship in this book could be a threat to their place in this program. And that in itself brings some tension because you learn pretty quickly just how much this program means to both of our characters. And it's really their life's work. It's what they're meant to do. It's what they feel they were put on Earth to do. So weighing up that, but they're also weighing up the possibility of losing each other in it. And that conversation, that balance is a really interesting one. Like I said, I don't read many romances, so I feel like I don't really have the vocabulary to talk about them in a, well, particularly unique way or a nuanced way. Um, but I did enjoy this, and I think it's worth reading. So yeah, We Could Be So Good by Cat Sebastian was the first one, the first romance I really read, I think, and because of that, I really didn't understand the genre conventions, and because this is a queer love story and it's set in the past in New York City. It's set, where is it, in the 50s. It's set in the 50s, and throughout the whole thing, I was anticipating a greater level of violence or a greater level of threat because of the nature of this relationship. So I was really tense, and I was more tense than I needed to be because I was so used to reading like lipfic and stuff where characters are sacrificed, characters are, you know, injured or the writers are more open to killing off their characters, basically. But obviously, now I realise because this is a romance, they weren't. I mean, it was very unlikely that they were going to kill one of them off. You know what I mean? But I do think it quite kind of added to it, It added a level of tension, of intrigue, of I really wanted to keep reading because I wanted to know what was going to happen. I wanted to make sure that everyone was going to be okay and how they were going to get out of this situation. And it wasn't perhaps as in depth. Things just sort of worked themselves out in a sense, but I think I was focusing on the wrong things. And yeah, it was just nice. I read it in a time I was right in the middle of exams of assignments, and I just needed something that was nice. So yeah, if that sounds interesting, check it out. That's Would We Be So Good by Cat Sebastian. Talk about a 180. The next one is Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I know I'm so late to this, but it's brilliant. It doesn't need an introduction. I just go and read it. You just should. It's just one of these things that is important. This book is a view of a possible future that I hope we never get to. And reading it now in the current moment in 2026 is a very unique experience because we've seen what's happening in America at the minute. We saw the turning over of Roe v. Wade and the disastrous consequences that can bring, and it's worrying. It's really worrying, and ought to be. You know, I It's difficult to put into words the 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 possible ramifications of what that means for us as people. I know I'm in Scotland, I'm not in America, but when things happen there, there's no saying they won't come here. There's no saying that just because I'm in a different country that you might be in a different country that it that we are safe. You know what I mean? And we ought to use our voices where we can. I understand that it's difficult because I myself find myself asking, well, what do I actually do? Where is it that I can be of help, that I can be of use to protect people in this situation? You know, you can say this of everything in the news at the minute. What is it that I can do on a personal level to help? Especially if I'm in a safe situation. Like, I'm in a very comfortable situation, I understand that, because I'm sitting in my bedroom talking about books, you know what I mean? So, and when you come across something like this, and and you look at the world around you, and it's like, this ought to be given the attention it needs, and it has been, thankfully, because there is a world in which this happens. There is a world in which the decisions that are being made keep happening. It keeps getting worse. We keep falling down the system of control where, like, this is the end point, you know what I mean? And I know that sounds dramatic, and it is dramatic now. But the thing is, if we don't consider it now, then we may like, if we're blind to it, then we may end up falling into it. It's a scary thought, but I think it's one that ought to be looked at, and that's what this book does. And I think that's brilliant for a piece of writing to highlight things that are important, that are scary, that gives us an avenue to talk about them. And I think that is so valuable in a piece of literature. I feel like this book can be read in so many ways. You could get so much. I mean, how many essays you could write about The Handmaid's Tale? You know what I mean? Yeah, what a book! Just read it. It's worth your time. Absolutely. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I'm not going to be the first. I'm definitely not the first person to say this, and I won't be the last, I'm sure. Anyway, one more book. There's one more book on this list, and I literally just talked about it, so I'm going to be very, very brief. That is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. Just good. It's just good. It's just good. We're following a class of Shakespeare students. They're putting on plays, doing stuff like this. Um, However, we open with Oliver. Oliver is in prison for a murder that he did not commit, and the policeman comes in that was on the case 10 years ago. He's been in prison 10 years. The police officer, he says, about I don't care about justice anymore. I just need to know what happened. So we're going back in time and looking at the events that led up to this murder and the reason why Oliver is in prison. And it all just falls out from there. It's brilliant. It's unique. It's so unique. It's set up on a scene by scene basis. It's like a play, but not really. My mom's reading it at the minute. That's why there's a bit more in it because I had to give it to her. You can tell from reading this book how much the author has read Shakespeare, how much the author understands it and has studied it, and there's this great respect you feel through the pages from the author of Shakespeare. I've said before, I'm an English student. I'm not a massive Shakespeare reader. And I didn't pick this up because it was Shakespeare. I think that's worth saying. I'm not that particularly interested in Shakespeare as a person, as his works. And I know that might be blasphemy to some people, but what the point I'm trying to make is you don't need to like Shakespeare to read this. But I will say you do need to be open to learning to appreciate what he's doing with his plays because the plays are quite important to the plot. You don't need to know what happens in the plays because they do the plays. But it's a really accessible view of Shakespeare. Like I think a lot of these are really propulsive. You really just want to keep reading them. They're really just worth your time. They're really just worth your time. That's what I'm going to say. Anyway, that is me. Thank you very much for being here. If you if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you like. Yeah, I hope you have a nice day.